Aaron with Bowties Treasures. I'm a Dixie Belle content creator, and as always, we're here to be creative, do some fun stuff, maybe learn a few things together as I demonstrate different projects that I have here. Tonight, we're continuing the project we worked on last night. Behind me is the dresser that last night many of you watched me apply the transfers on. This is what I want to work on shading tonight. Okay, so that's our goal. I have already worked on parts of it, and if you watched my live last night, you saw that I did this section down there the other night off camera. So that's kind of the look we're going for. I'm using a bit of an unusual color. I doubt you had probably heard someone use the word or say the color mud puddle anytime recently, so that's what we're working on. I looked for a color that I felt would complement the transfer I was expecting to use, and I changed my mind on the transfer, but I still love the color. It's a nice, rich, warm, just has a really soft look to it. Some other colors that would probably qualify or have worked really well is, I like to use chocolate, and also, let me bring you guys in closer. Chocolate's really nice. Buttercream is the base, 2 coats of buttercream. It probably, I mentioned this last night, in looking at it in different lighting, it could almost use 3 coats or 2.5 coats, but because I'm going to be adding the shading, we should be okay. Then I'm going to use a small craft brush to apply the colors. And the size of the brush is up to you. Depends on how big of an area or how much wiping away you're going to do. And then I have 2 different misting bottles. I have Dixie Belle's, then I just have another more inexpensive one that I'll keep both of them handy. The key to making this work, and y'all have seen me shade before if you're following me for some time. If not, maybe this will be the first time and you'll find something that maybe will help you. Good evening, Joy. Good to see you guys. Hope you're having a great weekend. All right, so let's start with this corner piece here. Later on, when you see the finished pictures, the other side is missing part of it. I usually don't try to overly repair pieces that are old. I just kind of like the look and feel of the old stuff. So if you see that they're not matching, you probably won't even notice if I didn't say anything. Okay, so whenever you're shading, and this, I call it shading, I don't know what anybody else would call it, but mist your piece first. You don't want this chalk paint drying. Now, if you're going to put it into the crevices, go ahead and just paint into that crevices, that's fine. And this will be the principle that I use all of it. And again, I'm very, 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 very aware. I do this a lot, so I feel like sometimes I wear it out, but it's such a great technique, at least for me. I'll take this over wax and all that any day, but you do what you like. So that's kind of the feel, that's kind of what I do first. Now, at this point, what I would recommend, this is a wet rag, and I'm just going to go ahead and wipe off the excess, because if you don't, you're going to be moving a lot of paint around. So I'm kind of carefully wiping. You could, if you need to make sure this base coat's dry really well, maybe give it a good day. But if you're not careful, you could actually wet distress your piece, which isn't horrible, but I'm not trying to wet distress right now. So you see how this French tip is making it soft? And continue to use your rag where you need to wipe off excess. But right now what I'm doing is I'm softening all the way around. Hi Deb, good to see you again. So now I can come back with my rag and I can wipe off on the high spots so that the paint in the crevices, like on this leaf here, still works. I'm looking for areas I may have missed. The problem with this kind of detail is if you stay on one side of it the whole time, you're going to miss. So you do want to you do want to inspect your work. I'm creating the look of, that it's not been cleaned very well over the years. So you see how I'm wiping in some of the larger areas? I don't want it to be, I want it to really look soft and feathered. Now here's the other, if you wanted other ways to achieve this, yes, maybe you could do wax. You could do blending where you paint buttercream and while it's wet, you apply the second color, but to me, this is so much easier. And like I said, to be able to use any color I want, I could match my transfers really well if I wanted to. So that's the look, and that didn't take very long at all, and it's all water-based. But two, because sometimes what I'll do is I'll take these maybe more longer than normal videos. Like last night we were on for an hour. I'll probably try and get that down to 30 minutes or so. So if you missed last night, definitely subscribe to the YouTube channel so you can catch up to all these. I consider them tutorials. They're not 5-minute highlights of here's how I did this. It's, if you want to learn how exactly I did it, that's kind of, I guess, not a specialty, but that's really what I focus on doing. That seems to work well. Okay, so you see how I sprayed it? I kind of feel like I oversprayed water, maybe too much water. Now I'm just going to come back, look for areas I missed. Wipe it off and then do your blending. If you try and use the French tips too soon, you're just going to be moving a lot of paint around, and I like to use the French tip just to soften that edge. So that's about all I'm going to remove, and now we'll use the French tip. Notice how sometimes I'll do this just to wipe off excess. I don't want this French tip to get loaded up. See how I'm pulling away? That's also pulling out some of that extra paint. This works on any kind of details. I do this a lot with like wood you bend moldings. This one is all original. I'm not doing any wood you bends on this one. So again, just keep going back. I usually, and I forgot to tell you, but I usually try and watch out from not letting the misting bottle spray your previous work, and I did that here. Do you see how that's creating a soft look? It's just elegant. I'm gonna go away from the camera here, and I'm going to put some on the top here because you're simulating, for the most part, somewhat of a built-up dirt, okay? So think about where dirt probably built up and put paint there. So again, I'm off camera, sorry about that. You can imagine, you kind of get the idea, hopefully. And then, because that's the top, I'm not going to wipe too much of it away, just enough. So the top now matches the rest of it. Okay, this part here, I need to decide. I think it would be good. Let me get this insert out of here. I'm not going to do any shading on the insert. That's the part that actually holds the mirror so it swivels. So let's do something with this bead here. Make sure you guys can see that okay. So as I mentioned a while ago, you might even need 2 wet rags, one to wipe off your brush, one to wipe off the piece, just kind of see how that goes. So I'm going to do a section at a time. See how I'm covering up the other one, the previously worked on area? Because the water drops will not, they'll leave like drops on your chalk paint, and I don't want that look. So you see how I'm actually going over the beading? And then we'll use the same technique. You can only go, you don't want to get all the way down to the end. I don't recommend going too far because you want to work wet, okay? And I think I should do some underneath. Okay. Then I'm going to wipe off the excess. I could stop right there, but I'm going to go ahead and soften the below or soften the edge. So just use that French tip to do any feathering, softening. Can you use other brushes? Yes, I can use any French Dixie Belle brush that will soften that edge. I just like the French tip because it really gets in there. I'm gonna do one last wipe so that the color is getting into those grooves really well. I'm just strategically wiping off parts that don't feel like got too much in there. I've done a lot. I do a lot of shading. It's my go-to detail builder. So maybe it's where some people say, okay, seen that, been there, done that. Not my style, I'm out of here. And that's okay. But I really wanted to make sure that I demonstrated this because I like to give the tutorial option to people. And when you see the finished pictures later this week, you'll know exactly how I put it together. Let me know if you have any questions. So far I've seen a couple good ones, so you're thinking about how this might apply to you and your work, so that's really good. And I like to see it all come together. I think you do too. So just getting it on there, wiping off any excess, knowing that I am going to go back and kind of put more paint on there when I do the brush, but I'm just getting a little bit of the excess paint off. It's so cool to see it kind of develop, you know? This dresser really didn't have much going for it. It was the, you know, typical stained wood, antique look. Now we're giving it some character, and we're not removing the aged style of it at all. I don't know if you remember the cherry blossom dresser I did. We did shading with peony. I'm pretty sure it was peony. And I really like how that soft pink shading looked on that French provincial dresser from a couple months ago. Okay, so just softening any areas. Wipe off as much as you want. That's really the key. Now, one thing you'll find on my brush, on my French tip, since it's new, it has a really big point. As opposed to a French tip that's a little older, it's flatter. You see the difference? They're both the same brush. So over time, you might like to have more of a blunt, larger, rather than a point. So sometimes you get your brush to the favorite level, and you might have multiple of these brushes going. So I'm just gonna wipe off, knowing that I have paint in the crevices. This keeps my highlight where it needs to be. Just gonna look around for any other area. So coming together. Remember, make it look like this is where it was not cleaned up at yet, or they couldn't clean it very well. So you're being really artistic with this because you're making judgment calls and artistic decisions. I'm going to bring in just a second, bring a little closer. Let me wipe off some of these negative space because I don't want it to be super dark in there. And that's where I'm going to go back to my brush and soften anything I just did. Okay. I think that's coming along pretty good. So this side over here is not done. We're working our way across. I almost forgot this part here. So as you can tell or get, I'm just working my way around the project. So I understand if you have to take off or go, but by all means, again, if you like, pass this on to someone who could use this technique. If you're watching a replay, let us know. That's always great to hear. Okay, It's looking great. Love how it's soft, love how it looks. What do y'all think? Same technique, same idea. Let's keep going over here and get my supplies onto that side of the room. And we'll end with this part. Just to give you all an idea, this lets me do it. Let me show you before we go any further. So this part is done. You see how I did shading up here and then all of the panels. I don't strive for perfection. Remember, it's supposed to look like someone just didn't clean it very well, so they would have never cleaned it perfectly. I also went ahead and I have also done up here. So I need to do all of this to the other side. So just to give you an idea of what I'm working on, let's do that on this side. Okay. Should almost quiz you guys to ask you what the steps are, but you know the steps. Okay, so we're going to work top down. Yesterday, or on the other side, I worked up. I think it's probably best to work top down, so we're going to do that. Same brushes and everything. And what I want to do here is I want to simulate. You're trying to simulate where dirt may have built up. If that's what if you're trying to do if you're trying to go for that, I want it to look like dirt has built up, then make sure you're using a color that looks like dirt built up. You know, don't. If you're trying to use moonshine metallics, you're not going to get the same look. So it just depends on what you're trying to accomplish. Let me just do a quick wipe off a little bit. Got a little bit extra in there. Okay. So at this point, I don't necessarily, the point's nice because I'm getting into the crevice here. That's about the number one reason why I like using the point. Outside of that, you don't really need this brush to do what I'm doing now. To give you an example, let me switch to, this is Dixie Belle's Belle brush. You don't even have to use the Belle brush, but I'm going to do that, okay? But it can accomplish the same feel. Most brushes can do this job. I just like using the French tip because it gets in the cracks really well. Use your rag to wipe off anywhere you don't want. So it can be a little crazy. I mean, you can get paint in the wrong spot, so that's what that rag's for. I'm gonna get this panel. If you want more shading, then use a bigger brush and wipe less of it off. Watch how I focus more on the corners, and sometimes I do not go to the middle because it kind of goes with that look I'm going for. See how I'm scribbling it? It's kind of bringing it over. Quick mist. And then we'll go in there, wipe my rag off. There's a lot of paint, probably more paint, so keep wiping off any excess. Okay. So once you do that, this is where I'll go back and I'll take off a little, if needed. This is an if needed stage. I wipe off anything on the outside. Don't want that going outside of the frame. I can tell over here that I went a little low. So I'm going to wipe some of that back. You don't have a lot of working time. You don't want to remist an area that you worked on a few minutes ago. So be careful about that. The nice thing about this is right now is I don't have to judge this side to the other side. Nobody's going to be able to compare the two sides together. But you want to have a general consistent look. So I'm actually even going to wipe off even a little bit more. I'm finding I'm putting too much paint in there, okay? So that's where you either change your brush size or change how much paint you're putting on your brush. So but it's all still wet, so you can totally do that still, all right? I think that's good. And if I turn this around, see if it'll, shine's kind of getting to it right now. There you go. So wipe off, remove. Still wet, still pliable. Love it. I think that panel's done. If for some reason that this side turned out better than the other side, I can always just put another coat of buttercream on there. But I think both sides pretty much accomplished what I needed to. Let's do this little decorative element. So if you're joining late, I started with the mirror, which has a lot of these decorative pieces, so I'm kind of finishing that same technique. Let me wait till my camera wants to get my hand. So I'm just using a craft brush right now, pushing the paint into the cracks. Probably too much paint, but that's okay. Maybe I'll put some up here. I don't think I'm putting any on the drawer side, on the drawer. Subject to change, of course. And it may be good if you're kind of messy. Remove the drawer so you don't get any of this on there. Not that you couldn't wipe it down. Guys, thanks for joining me tonight. It's kind of a last minute decision to go live, but I really wanted to get some more time on the project and also get a little bit of opportunity to record some more, but stay tuned for the finished product. And I'll get this wrapped up this week. I can't wait to put the mirror up there, see it all come together. Great with you guys as always. Well, once again, thank you so much for watching. Thanks for following. I'm Aaron with Bowtie Treasures, Dixie Belle content creator, and we're live from the Bowtie Treasure Studio. Have a fantastic weekend. Stay tuned, and we'll talk again soon. We all take care, right?
That's the end of the show. Make sure you subscribe and ring the bell before you go. Bye.